we can't create more time. We can only do the best we can with the energy we have and the time that's allotted every day, which is the same for everyone, 24 hours. I just think it's a huge difference, and it's the first time in my life I've actually, I think, noticed it within myself specifically as an athlete, of how making a decision to do less has actually allowed me to do more.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Dude, happy Monday.
Hey, happy Monday to you, man.
Happy Monday to you, and happy almost Christmas. Happy holidays. Most of you will probably listen to this a little bit later than the day we release it, because today is Monday, December 16th. So if you're listening to it next week or currently where you are, hey, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Sorry for that delay there. I was doing some updating there. I don't know.
It's all right. Skype requires us to update like once a month for what seems to be no apparent reason, because I've yet to see any like major differences. But hey, we do what we got to do to get this podcast out. If it's your first time listening, we appreciate it. It is, like we said, it is December the 16th, and I believe this is Crushing Iron Podcast 380.
380, yeah, man.
380. That, there are a couple podcasts that, like, numbers that we churn out, and I'm like, yeah, that's a number. And then for whatever reason, saying 380 sounds like a lot of podcasts.
It does, but it's actually 330. So does that sound like a lot less?
Oh, well then we've basically done nothing. I know. We've basically done absolutely nothing. But yeah, anyway, we'll just kind of get back to work, and then when we get to 380, I'll try to celebrate again. I'm not sure why I thought it was 380. I'm just a little bit ahead of the game today. And again, if it's your first time listening, we appreciate it. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast. We cover all things triathlon, life, how they intersect, how they complement each other. Mike and I both share our experiences and kind of our daily and weekly struggles and successes as we go through triathlon, endurance training, and sports as both athletes and coaches. And then we also will share some of the similar stories and oftentimes triumphs of the athletes that we work with. And then also frequently we'll share some of the stories or cover questions and topics that our members of our Crushing Iron Facebook group will mention or ask about. If you're on Facebook and you want to be a part of that, there are a lot of really awesome people in there that if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask them. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and there's a lot of really knowledgeable and experienced people in there that are more than willing to give you a well thought out, sincere answer than I would probably say some of the other Facebook groups where you might get harped on for asking something that might seem to other people obvious. But there's a lot of great people in there. So again, if you want to, you can hop into on a Facebook and search Crushing Iron Group, and we'll let you in there after you answer one simple question. But yeah, but as we do, it is a non-sponsored podcast with no commercials. We rarely ever have an outline. It's more of just kind of a laid-back discussion, conversation style of, again, usually what Mike and I are going through presently. And sometimes they are outlined, like we had one last week, one each of the last 2 weeks with my special Christmas edition podcast of last week that got a few laughs. And that's, again, what we'll try to do today. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and we hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Yeah. You said it's how life intersects with triathlon. And sometimes it's how life does not intersect with triathlon. We cover it pretty honest. We try to stay... I think pretty open.
Well, that's the best, I think the best policy. And I will say that this, as it's one of those times of year where athletes are really, really far away from racing and given that this miles for most, and like you said, it's podcast 330, we cover it all. And I think a lot of times when you're covering things that are very broad and sometimes not race specific, sometimes probably you have to dig a little bit deeper to figure things out. But this is, again, like the things we talk about and what we go through and how we try our best to convey our thoughts and our feelings, as we do that in a way that will hopefully allow you to maybe think through and critically think through some of your own training and what you're doing, and also not just through your training, but also through how your approach to training, your mindset, and how you see triathlon, and then most importantly, how you see yourself in triathlon and the demands of training and the demands we put on ourselves. And if I could say, like, if there's two things that we really hope that you get out of our podcast. Maybe not everyone, because everyone won't be for everyone, but out of the majority of our podcasts is that we really hope that we are able to help you find a way to enjoy the sport, to enjoy it for all the great things it can give to you and in your life, both from fitness, but also physically, emotionally, and mentally, and how to balance things. And sometimes, again, like we live in a world where things can seem overwhelming and demanding and stressful, and we oftentimes get into things like triathlon to do ourselves some good, to relieve anxiety or to relieve stress or to lose some weight, and then along the way sometimes we get lost. We get caught up in our successes, we get caught up in expectations, we get caught up in comparison, and then before you know it, the thing that we love, the thing that we've chased down to help kind of change a part of our life has become a negative or a drawback. And so we hope through this podcast and through some of them specifically, you can kind of help kind of rein yourself into enjoying things more, and maybe not taking yourself so seriously, and maybe taking other opportunities and looking at other avenues to enjoy it. And then also from a training aspect, we honestly, like, we'll have specific podcasts that are geared towards, swimming, cycling, and running, or nutrition, or race day planning, or we get into some of the nuts and bolts of kind of the back end of triathlon in terms of the data and how you should train, how you should periodize, and all that kind of fun stuff that so many people love. But and this goes with kind of our mantra and philosophy with coaching is we truly and genuinely want you to be healthy and happy. And I think both of those come together. It's kind of like the chicken before the egg, is that if you can be healthy and stay healthy, I generally think you're probably going to be happy, because you're going to be able to continue on and do the things you want to do, and be consistent and enjoy what you're doing. And if you can do that, then you'll see results, which again makes you happier. And then again, if you can stay healthy, it's going to make you happy. And so that's truly, I think, and I think I'm speaking for both of us, but that's really what we want you to get out of our podcast, and the theme of it, and the discussions, and some of the breakdowns we do of races and training is just, we want you to have a good mindset and enjoy the sport and be as happy and as healthy as you can throughout the duration of your time doing triathlon, or really any endurance sports.
Yeah, man. And along that lines, of course, we seem to line up a lot when we're not even really trying, but that, and whether or not you buy into that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing or not, I can't remember how you stand on that, but like, the one thing we do know is it takes a lot of time to master anything, whatever the craft is, right? Like, if you want to be the best accountant in the world, you got to spend a lot of time on it.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. And I find it interesting because, a lot of us get into this sport because of what you just said. We want to be happy and healthy. And usually it's because we're trying to change something or get our lives in order or whatever, and use it as a vehicle for being just more fit and, feeling better, right? And the thought about mastering this craft of triathlon that takes a long, long time, and how much of a burden that can be in a way, where we get into this because we just want to feel better, or we want to,
right.
Most of us. And then I was thinking about really how difficult it is to get faster, you know what I mean? And to get better in this sport. Like, are you going to really commit to getting better? I was just thinking of it, like, because I started triathlon like 7 years ago, and I feel like I have a really pretty good handle on what's going on. But that said, of course I'm getting older, so you got to weigh that in too. But like, I don't really feel like I've gotten faster per se. And I think what I'm getting at here is that it's so easy with all the hacks and all this sort of stuff out there that, get faster, this and that. And I think that there is ways to get faster, like in super short term, but I don't think that really pays off for you in the long term. So how are you looking at every day as a person that you want to be would think about it versus, like somebody who's just trying to get faster in the next couple months because they want to do a race. But is that the best long-term plan? And that's really not even why you got in the sport to begin with. So how you lose focus, or how easy it is to lose focus of what the true aim and true goal of getting into this triathlon business is all about anyway.
Well, I think, I mean, you bring up a great point, and I think just a really great area for discussion. And I think we're oftentimes, kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, like in terms of mastery, and I don't honestly know where I stand on the 10,000 hour rule, because I don't necessarily think nothing is exact. Like, you know, it's not 10,000 hours. Kind of, I was joking with somebody over the weekend, like talking about when you talk to builders of houses or commercial spaces, it's always going to be ready on the 1st. Oh, it's going to be ready February 1st. Oh, well, it's probably looking like May 1st. Or like, no one ever says, yeah, it's probably going to be ready like, I don't know, April 12th, somewhere around there. It's always the 1st. So like these exact dates, I don't know if I can get behind that, but I do understand. And I think that there's the longevity and the duration of some of these things that we have to focus on. But in terms of mastery, the most important thing that I think we can always do before we become obsessed with mastering triathlon or mastering cycling or mastering anything is the most important thing you need to focus on mastering is mastering yourself. And I think that is like one of the biggest obstacles that we all face in endurance sports, because we live with ourselves. We 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every second, every moment of the day, we are ourselves, and we have to deal with the responsibilities that we have, the stressors, and triathlon or endurance sports in general is supposed to be an outlet. And working on ourselves, and I think most people have gone through this in different areas and parts of their life, working on yourself is hard. It is not easy, and it's definitely not a 10,000 hour rule. It is a for life rule. Yeah. And I think when you look at triathlon and look at the longevity in which so many athletes can have, and also the fact that it is like one of those sports where if you keep chipping away, you can see incredible gains. Like, I know for myself specifically, like, I think the 70.3 distance for me is a great example of my very first 70.3 ever, and this is a long time ago. I don't even want to say the date, but it was a long time ago. 35 years ago, I did I think I did my first ever 70.3 was a 620. It was my very first one. I was learning. I was like a huge rookie. I thought I knew so much, and it turns out, I look back on like the guy that did that race, I was like, oh my God, you were an idiot. Like, you thought, like, I remember it vividly. But 6.5, 7 years later, after doing that person, I think it was even longer than that. 8 years later, I think my 70.3 now is like 432. So almost 2 hours off, but it took me years, years and years and years and years and years of sometimes things went, the same. Like, I remember, I think I chipped things down because I always use kind of Gulf Coast 70.3 as my barometer. That was my very first one. I did it 5 years in a row, and the times went like 620 to 550 to 530 to 515 to 5 to 455. And then finally I broke through and had like a 430 something day. But again, like you get to it, the faster you get, right?
Well, that's the catch.
The increments get smaller. So, it's like a person trying to, PR the marathon versus PR a 5K. You're looking at like 30 seconds for a 5K PR is huge. And then you look at marathons, people can PR like 20-something minutes, which is basically the duration of some person's entire 5K. And so it does. But I think what makes this sport so challenging is that for most of us it comes, and this has been kind of where I've been in my life recently, is the most difficult part of triathlon is that it comes to us, or we come to it in a period in our lives to where things are no longer controllable. And again, like, we don't have control of our lives, but like, if we picked up a triathlon in high school and college, you basically have limited number of variables. You've got yourself to worry about, making good grades, or just working a job 9 to 5. You don't have any pets, you don't have any kids, you're not married, you're not, have all these other huge responsibilities. So you can kind of do what you want with the sport. You can work out as much as you want to. You can train as much as you want. Finances might be just expendable because you don't have these other responsibilities. But then as you get into the sport, as you become older, your life can change dramatically. And so we come into this sport, many of us, at a certain place in our life, to where we need the sport or need sports, right? And we need endurance sports because people, I think, crave endurance sports because of what it can do for your mind, just mentally and emotionally, what exercising for those longer periods and kind of finding yourself through the duration and the volume of this training can do for you, but how like drastically different our lives can be. And I mean, I look back at my own, if I take triathlon as a common denominator, and then I look at my life for the past 7 years, going through, single and, alcoholic, and then single and then recovery, and then dating, and then married with a kid, and then moving 3 times, different city, total change of life, total change of, a lot of ways, changes of personality, changing characteristics, and also changes in what matters. And then when you look at like the energy that you have in certain areas of your life, it takes energy, right, and motivation and focus and commitment to feel like you can master something. And I think sometimes and again, I've talked about this in a few of our most recent podcasts about the kind of the internal tug of war I was having with myself personally, in terms of getting to a very successful point in my personal athletic racing career, as what was the year of 2018 was my best year, I would think, probably ever racing. But then where my life was taking me was away the energy and the time that I would need to continue to focus on that, that quote unquote mastery of my sport and my disciplines, and getting better and going from 430s to 420s, or 415s. Like the level of mastery then is crazy. It's like trying to drop your 100-meter time, 0.001. Everything matters. And I was having trouble just understanding and realizing that, given where I was now in my life and where I really wanted to master things, that I wasn't putting I wasn't allocating my energy and my time and my motivation correctly. And so I was actually mastering nothing. I was mastering neither my personal life and professional life or my triathlon life. And we had a friend in town this weekend, and he was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" I was like, I haven't been this stress-free in I don't know how long. And not because my life isn't without challenges or stresses, but it's because I finally came to grips a few months ago with the amount of time I had, and it came back to, I mean, I've said this before, it came to getting down and trying to not necessarily master running or master trail running. I'm not going to be like some ultra champion, but it came down to I can do this, right? And I can do it and feel I think this is the most important part. I feel like it's something I can do and feel good about it, that I'm doing it well, not just treading water. And then I also feel like complementing that is I can also feel like I'm being I'm trying to master parenting and trying to master being a good husband and a good friend and a great coach. And so I finally came to that terms of you can either master nothing and be treading water and be running on a treadmill of going, putting out a lot of energy and going nowhere, or you can try to reprioritize your energy to feel like you're actually then truly mastering things. And I think it's a great topic, because this time of year we sit back and with our friends or our spouses or just by ourselves, and we make out these lists of things we want to master, right? Mm-hmm. These resolutions we want to master for this next year, without, I think, understanding when we always list 10. 10's really feasible. I'm not saying that to be Debbie Downers, be why not just list one that you can, because it's about success. It's a person who schedules themselves 20 hours a week because it looks good on paper that they might be able to accomplish it, and they only get half of it done and then feel bad about it, or it's the person who schedules themselves 6 hours a week and nails it every time. I just think the positive reinforcement and affirmations that we can do for ourselves, especially this time of year, that can be compounded to turn into something that can be really, really good, not just for this year, but for life.
Yeah, man. There's another guy that is like Malcolm Gladwell. They call him the dean of personal motivation. His name is Earl Nightingale. For all you oldsters out there, you probably know him. But his line was, if you spend an extra hour of the day, studying your chosen field, you can be an expert in 5 years. So again, what you're saying is how many 1 hour blocks do we have to do all this stuff? And then you mix in triathlon, which is 3 sports, and how do you master, each of those or whatever. So I just keep thinking about this long term. I was talking to my neighbor, and he's a real shrewd, like, money guy, and he grew up with that, right? So, and you always talk about investing, right? And how investing over the long term is what, is the drill, right? So it's like there's a lot of stuff out there now that's like, turn this into this overnight and do this 30 days to this or whatever it is. And we get so sidetracked by that. And like you were saying, if you got a list of 10 things and you keep bouncing back and forth them, you're going to be, never master any of them. So mix that back into our desires. Okay, we want to get in good shape, but then all of a sudden, I kind of like this triathlon. I want to get really good at it. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm not a good swimmer. I'm okay biker. I'm a pretty decent runner. Like which area of focus do you pick? And then if you're going to spend 1 hour a day on swimming and then try to get that mastered in a few years, and then you got that bike hanging over you all the time and whatever. So I just think it takes a lot of focus and like clarity, like you're talking about, like what is it? And you're talking about trail running and how you feel like you're getting a grip on it. And this always brings me back to like when you talk about varieties for the week, and how you like to, it's fun sometimes to mix up a workout every now and then, but you like to look at workouts stacked up against the same workouts stacked up against each other, and see what's going down there. So let's say like, now and through the end of January, where's the harm in saying, okay, I want to master an hour easy run. So in other words, I'm thinking about it in terms of like, okay, like you say, you go out today and your easy run for an hour is whatever, your heart rate's 135 or whatever. And then maybe by the end of January, you're going the exact same speed, but like, it's the heart rate's down to 120 or whatever. Like those are the tough ones. It's like in this sport, I really do feel like you have to master. It's like weightlifting or something. Until you can like really have good control of bench pressing 200 pounds, you shouldn't be going too fast up the ladder because you're messing with form, you're messing with all kinds of different things, and your body probably isn't ready. You can make a quick game here and there, but in the long run, you're going to get hurt or whatever the case may be. And translating that into running or whatever, that's why I think people have such a hard time with this idea of running slow. They don't grasp the idea of mastering a certain pace first before you move.
Well, I think mastery is frustrating because a lot of it isn't entertaining, and that's one of the biggest issues. Like you just said, like mastery is repetition. It's about doing the basics and doing them right as often as you can to where it basically becomes like an unconscious response. It's like if a chef comes into the kitchen and they're trying to teach the other sous chefs how to make a perfect dish, he's not going to hand them 19 different variations of a chicken or a risotto. He's going to hand them the exact same one every single time until they can perfect it to the T. It's not going to be varied because not perfection, but mastery is about repetition and doing things over and over and over again. Because again, how else do you plan? This is again like for athletes who are obsessed with variety. And again, like there is a point to variety, but the point shouldn't be entertainment, because you're taking away from something that is repeatable that you can actually then grade against the next one and compare it and then figure out how things are going. And I mean, that's also why it can seem boring and monotonous to some, because we as the year, like in the past few decades, like the average person's attention span has gone down to like 0. Like we need more stimulus than ever. And like the history of human beings and like human nature is like we need more stimulus now, quote unquote. We need, as in like huge quotes. It's like more like we want and crave and are addicted to more stimulus. And so it's not oftentimes that you need it, it's more that you want it. And that's where mastery and time comes in, and that you have to understand that the best things in life aren't quick fixes. Like they amount over time. But again, like you have to be, if you're sitting down and looking at your goals for next year, what you want to accomplish, like there's always like things to look into in terms of like where, because listen, like this is true with everyone. Like our life and where we are in our season of life and our training don't always match up. But life is, like going back to the beginning of this podcast, about being happy and healthy and having a good mindset. It is so much about coming to terms with what you have and what you could, like, what is wrong with understanding what you truly have to give? What do you have to give? And sometimes we ask of ourselves too much, because we either feel like we aren't enough, we feel like we need to validate ourselves, or we feel like we're never going to be better unless we do more, or we've always kind of seen ourselves in a critical light with negative self-talk or a bad body image, and so we need to do more, we need to eat less, we need to perform better in order to kind of validate our existence in our own mind. And I think that when it comes to mastery, and again, like I think people's perception of mastery is people see it as like perfection. You've perfected it. And I think for most people, and this is myself included, like mastery, I think is like is more so like an understanding of what we need to do to minimize our imperfections. And I think if you look at it that way, in terms of just being aware of our flaws, because we all have flaws. There are things that we are not good at. If you're not good at boundaries, be aware of that. If you're a person who likes to overcommit and over train or over race, be aware of that. If you're more likely to do the opposite and not work out enough, be aware of that. Or if you're more apt to work through a niggle when you should rest or sick, like be aware of that. And that's like, so mastering ourselves is the key to mastering anything else. But if you can't, in my opinion, and I'm no like professional at basically anything, is mastering yourself is something, it is critical, and I would almost say essential and a requirement for mastering anything. And that goes with triathlon. You have to know yourself and be okay with where you are. And again, I think if you can do that, like I have never come across an athlete who we've had a hard discussion with and I've said, I think you don't need to do this. I think you need to step back and do less. Where they've been, oh my gosh, that's so much more stressful. No, they've always been like, you know what? Like there's a huge stress relief. Like knowing that the amount of energy and time that we have is enough. And now it's up to us to choose where to put it. Because like one of my biggest pet peeves has always been, ever since I worked for this guy who had literally 88 things halfway done and nothing finished. He had the energy and the ideas to do and accomplish basically, I think, anything. He was so smart. He was a businessman, so smart, and it's like endless energy. But what did is that took him to 88 different places, and he never mastered himself with his attention span and discipline to ever get one of them right. And ended up going out of business. That wasn't because he wasn't smart. It wasn't because he didn't have great ideas. It wasn't because he didn't know enough. It was because I feel like he couldn't master himself to where you could produce the things you wanted to produce. And so I think that coming to that realization of what we have and the energy we have, and most importantly, like the time, we can't create more time. We can only do the best we can with the energy we have and the time that's allotted every day, which is the same for everyone, 24 hours. It's not that everybody needs more time. It's that usually we just need to allocate our energy better and then wake up the next day and just be like, I just think it's a huge difference. And it's the first time in my life I've actually, I think, noticed it within myself specifically as an athlete, of how making a decision to do less has actually allowed me to do more from a fulfillment aspect. Making a decision to not, put the pressure on myself to keep trying to master triathlon because I just don't have the time right now. Or no, that's a lie. I have the time. But what I truly want to do right now doesn't line up with that. Mm-hmm. And since I've actually come to terms with that, and now I've been allocating my time the way that I feel pulled and really, designed to do, but also taking time for myself, like I feel like I can not mastering it, but I'm mastering myself. I'm not mastering trail running. I'm just and that'll be like more than obvious on Saturday when I race for like the first time in like over a year. But I feel like I've mastered my energy and my time. And I think that is a huge barrier and obstacle that most, especially endurance athletes, have, because most endurance athletes, or a large majority, are type A. So more is like right in their wheelhouse. I want to do more, and I want to do better at doing more. And those are very difficult things to balance and feel like you can achieve the things you want to achieve with the expectations and what you anticipate being able to accomplish, when not all those things line up, because we're not in control. And so I think it's a very delicate balance, and I think it's one of those things where we oftentimes have to kind of rein ourselves in and have those hard conversations with ourselves to make things really enjoyable, even though they may not look like what we originally thought they were going to look like.
Yeah, man, it's when you get into triathlon, sometimes I just wonder if like triathlon is kind of part of the vehicle, as to like, if things aren't going well or whatever, and you're trying to change and you want to get into triathlon and you want to be a better person and all that stuff. And, it's kind of about, trying to figure out who you are. And I think there's part of that, it just happens naturally through the process. And then once you find out who you are, really know yourself. And that sounds like where you're at. It's kind of like you're finding out, what you really care about. And then that's sort of like the journey through triathlon to give you the energy and maybe the clarity to figure that stuff out. And then you apply it to what you really want to do. And I think a lot of times we get confused because triathlon is so exciting, man, when you get in. And I still love everything about it. And it's such a mystery and such a puzzle, but it is a big puzzle sometimes. And the more we pour ourselves into figuring that out, and and realize how difficult it is, because like I was saying, it's like you kind of have to master part of the journey all the time. So you're like, until you can handle a certain load, you can't go into the next load. But like you said, if triathletes are type A and they want to keep pushing, they think that's the way to do it, but it's not. It's about getting a really good handle on where you're at. And then, a lot of times in those spots, you can reflect on like, okay, now I see what this is going to take for me to think, to get to where I think I can go or whatever. And then you're like, man, that's going to take a lot. But if it unveils the true nature of what you really want it to be, or what's really important, that's where I look at it too.
I think isn't a lot like that. I mean, I could be like butchering this quote, but isn't it like, the enemy of good is great, or the enemy of better is best? Like we're getting better, or we're doing really good, but the enemy is our thoughts and our expectations would say we're not great enough, or we're not the best. And so we oftentimes don't appreciate that. And I think oftentimes in our sport, which again, like you said, can be so confusing, is as we think through things, as we look at our progression, and as we look like the process that we're in, and we look to where we want to go, is just sometimes just sticking to the mastery of doing really good and doing and getting better. And oftentimes you see athletes, they want to like reinvent the wheel, because although they're getting better and they're doing really good, they aren't quote unquote great, or they quote unquote the best. They want to change things up. And that, again, like that takes you steps backwards. And when it comes to mastering, and I think, again, like mastery is a process. It's never, I don't think anything you can truly master, because if you talk to anyone who's at a really high level that's a professional at really anything, it's a never ending journey. Like you never truly feel like you've mastered this. You don't just, try to just stop thinking, I mastered it, I no longer have to be good at it, because that's also when you can become worse or take steps back. And so, again, like in this time of year where we're constantly trying to figure out and find and search and understand where we want to go for next year, I think it's important for us all to ask, like, if that's you and you're that person who might be struggling for, in terms of figuring out where it is we want to go, is is always asking like additional whys. Like you can't ask yourself too many questions. Like why do I want to do this, or why do I really want to do this, or why is it important to me? And I think that you should always not should always, but it's I think it's always helpful to have answers to yourself that are meaningful and that you understand and that you are true to. Not I think we've mentioned this before and referenced it many occasions about the podcast we did with Steve Magnus, where he said that athletes that race for something or someone greater than themselves often succeed more or don't give up or do better than athletes who are only focused on themselves. Because you're able to and so you have like a quote unquote why or a motivation that's external or internal, that's not solely based around you and an expectation. That once you remove that pressure and that, I think what is oftentimes extra stress and extra tension, allows yourself to produce your best results. And so I think if you can dig deep enough to find those, and again, like it doesn't have to be some like world changing, life altering why. It can just be like, I want to do this because I truly just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it means it means something to me to do this. And those are the things that you latch onto that I think propel you through that, 50-year course that is mastery, and I think again, like that's what we all kind of aspire to have, but we're oftentimes, as with training and in life, we're distracted into the headliners that are always engaging in a way of grabbing our attention, but they're never something that we actually retain long enough to apply. And I think that's triathlon and that's endurance sports. Is you have to do it long enough to be in it and immerse yourself in it to get to a point to where you can apply it to yourself. And that's when things start to make sense, and that's when you can kind of start putting the pieces together and start performing the way you want to perform. And then again, the hardest thing then is to not get distracted and want to do it different, and again, there's a time and place for that, but it's what makes the sport, endurance sport, so fun. Like I had a couple of friends that posted I think it was a link to a Runner's World article, and it had something to do with some point, like, running can like take away or help alleviate a lot of or some of the symptoms of like anxiety and depression. And I don't want to say that people get into the sport for those reasons, because I don't believe that. I believe a lot of people do. I think a lot of people are called to get into endurance sports because of the allure of what you can do and the ability and the opportunities that you have through this sport to work through things in any way you choose, with and doing it in a healthy way that can be displayed, that isn't, to me, like running is a great example of like it's a acceptable form of therapy that you don't have to feel ashamed about by sharing. It's like, I went for an hour run is a lot safer to post than I just had an hour-long therapy session with my therapist. Like, it's like to me, there are a lot of times they're the exact same thing. But that, like, and again, like the reason we get into this sport, back to mastery, is I think we get into it to master ourselves, or to master these areas of our lives that we feel like we now have limited control over, whether it's our schedule, or it's the busyness and hectic pace of the professional life that we live, or if it's our kids, and the demands that they have, or if it's anxiety or depression. And like, so to feel like we can take back control of our lives by choosing to do something and carving out that time is huge. But again, I think mastering ourselves and always keeping that as kind of a top of mind area is really important, to not let you get yourself away of getting out of your own way when it comes to the quote unquote. And again, like we're using the word mastery as just kind of like the point of reference for this conversation. It's not about perfection, but it's about I think trying to master something is trying to, I think, take either a quote unquote own it or take ownership of the process towards something that leads you to more understanding or being more aware of of your inconsistencies or obstacles that you have and how to overcome them. Not that you don't have them, right. And I think that's a big point of clarity.
Yeah, it's like having a good handle on it, like what's going on and why you're doing it and that sort of stuff. And you feel comfortable about it because, like if I look back on this whole process for me, and maybe there's a lesson in here somewhere, but when I got in, and I think I was like a lot of people, it's like, all right, I signed up for my first Ironman race, and you know how that takes over your brain, and it's like the obsession with things. You want to do this and this. And the very nature of endurance sports is kind of weird because there's like, it takes a long time and it's really kind of slow, right? It's a slow, patient process. The races are slow and patient, really. But there's also people, we have this tendency to put the word fast in there. I want to get fast, but you're not really fast. You're not really going that fast per se in comparison to really what fast is. And so we're thinking fast, but we know we have to be patient. We know we have to be slow. And that first year I trained, and it's like sort of this amped up kind of like, I just got to keep pushing through walls and busting down new levels. And that's what happens kind of when you start. You're always new PR for distance or pace or whatever it is. And I finished Ironman Wisconsin that year, and then you you had just done Swim the Suck, and me and about 3 other guys decided to do a half Ironman down at Alabama.
Good old Goose Pond.
Goose Pond. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks after Ironman Wisconsin. And
it was like 3.5, 4 weeks, yeah.
And I literally did nothing between Ironman Wisconsin and that race. I did not ride my bike, I did not swim, and I did not run. And I went down and did a half Ironman. All right, so like a year before that, a half Ironman would have seemed ridiculous to even think about, right? And then all of a sudden, yeah, I'd never done one, and it just seemed mammoth. And I did a half Ironman without really training. I mean, of course, I had all the other training, but in my mind, I remember thinking, that's what I want to be at. It's like, it was pretty, I didn't have my best race or anything like that, but it was okay. And I was like, just the thought of being able to like not do anything for a month and show up and be able to be in shape or capable of doing a half Ironman was pretty impressive. And I remember that thought coming across my mind. It's like, that's kind of what it's all about, is being at a level, at a shape and an understanding and a belief in yourself or whatever, that you can handle things like that. And then what a confidence builder that is like, you're just training, you're doing your thing, and then it's like, yeah, all right, I could do that race next week. Yeah. And that kind of like all-time, like consistent level of fitness, and what confidence that would translate into normal life without the demands of saying, I want to go to Kona every time I go in a damn race. It's like that pressure and the idea that you want to go out and always set a PR and that kind of stuff. I really think that's like almost that's that better and best enemy thing you're talking about. It's like, man, get that out of your head and just be, consistent and solid, and let things take care of themselves more so than putting that, like you talk about Olympians all the time. What kind of a weight that must be to train for 4 years for one day.
Well, I mean, but for them, the term like yes, I think that they go into every training session totally, with memory loss and naive of what they're trying to accomplish in 1, 2, 3, or 4 years away when it comes to the Olympics. No, I think they probably think about it every single day. But I don't believe that. And like having read interviews and how from Olympians and people who have gone through the Olympic process and qualifying and the standards you have to meet, they don't try to cut corners to get there. They just have a focus of trying to get there. They don't deviate, or they don't have these huge variations of panic. I think I think panic's probably a great word to use for triathletes, is that we love to panic. We're just not there yet. Well, I've got to do this. And I look at this swim, if I ever start working with a new athlete and I dig back through their training, sometimes you can see weeks or decisions of panic. And again, that's where mastering ourselves and your sport should always come before trying to master a specific event and then taking the mastery of yourself and your sport and just basically putting it on the side. And I mean, what I mean by that is I this is like a hard conversation that I have to have with many athletes that I work with, is that I'm never going, and you'll tell them this, and like, I will never ever sacrifice your short-term health and well-being and longevity for a race. And what I mean by that is, if you, in terms of like the process of mastery and long-term success and being to be able to be happy and healthy and sustainable in a very long sport, is if you signed up for a marathon and maybe it was a good idea or a bad idea, A, it's not my fee. I'm not going to sacrifice you or make bad decisions just to try and make you feel good about getting to where you need to go to get there. So, example being, if you have a 12-mile week and the next week asks you to do 16 miles, but you just can't do the 12 miles, or you hurt so bad at the end of 12 miles, or you miss it because you're sick, or you just didn't want to do it, guess what the next week's not going to be? The next week is not going to be 16 miles. You try to, again, when it comes to mastering yourself, that oftentimes comes through consistency, but it also is allowed and able to like prosper through humility and understanding where you are and what's actually good for yourself. But again, in endurance sports and type A athletes and people who are obsessed with perfection and getting better, one of the hardest things that we do is look at ourselves and saying, that's actually not a good decision. Or I shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't work out today, or I shouldn't do that session, or you're right, bumping up from a 2-hour run to a 3.5-hour run just because isn't a good thing, and it's actually going to do more harm than good. But that's how we get distracted, and that's how we get distracted by panic, and that's how we go. But again, it's not like anything that's earth-shattering here. We all, like, we've been shaped this way for the last 5 or 10 years. How we see society is we've been shaped to be impulsive and distract and panic because we don't have it right now, or we are on the right course, we're just not on the best course, and chasing that and not. I think sometimes we just forget to appreciate how far we've come and what we've mastered so far, because we're always so worried about what we haven't mastered that we forget about the things that we have, and then we forget to even use those things to continue on that path of, quote unquote mastery, and whatever it is, whether it's personal, professional, physical. And I think reminding ourselves again, as we sit back and we look at the year 2020 and 2020 goals and 2020 races, and what I want is mastery is a process. It never ends. And our timing and our timetables and our expectations they're not meaningless. They're just oftentimes like fruitless. And what I mean by that is, like, we can say like I had an athlete that raced this last weekend that did a half marathon, and a couple weeks ago she texted me and she was like, I really, really want to run a sub 2-hour half marathon by May. And I was like, okay. And she's like, what do you think? I was like, I think it's possible, but you have no idea what that timeline is, because there's so many things taken into account. How are you recovering? How are you training? How are things going to go? How is the race day going to go? And she went out and did like a 152 this weekend. And I was like, well, there's nothing wrong with being ahead of schedule. But the fact is that there really is no schedule, or there shouldn't be. We just put ourselves on a schedule with these races that we look at as expiration dates and deadlines that are going to determine who we are and how we do and where we are on that path, instead of the athletes, that just wake up and just really want to get better and be in that feeling of doing it every single day and not have that weight of perfection. Because again, master and perfection to me are two totally different things. And I think once you've mastered yourself into a process of just wanting to get better and mastering yourself, because again, getting better is about mastering yourself, because in order to get better, you have to master yourself to get yourself to do the things that you want to do to get better. Waking up on time, getting sleep, fueling right, eating right, limiting your stressors, doing your training when you're supposed to do your training, taking days off when you're supposed to take days off, go easy when you're supposed to go easy, go hard. Like, none of those are training related. None of those are performance related. Those are about mastering yourself. Psychologically, emotionally, mentally, however you want to put it, it's about mastering yourself, your decision making, your time management, your discipline on sleeping and eating right. All those things have nothing to do with mastering training. They're about mastering yourself so that yourself can then master training. And that's how you get to better performances. It's not, again, you don't want the training and the triathlon to lead it. You want yourself to lead it, because you're the one controlling. You're the one that does the runs, the rides, the swims. You're the one that that chooses to stay up till midnight and not get enough sleep and sleep in the next morning. You're the one that makes those decisions. So if you can't focus on mastering yourself and that discipline, that commitment, then your mastery of triathlon is going to be very, very difficult to try to accomplish, and could lead to just more headaches and obstacles and stress. When again, like, think about the amount of stress you're going to relieve by choosing to master yourself first, and then take that mastery of yourself, or that new improved version of yourself in different areas that can now do triathlon. Think how much happier, more content, and more fulfilled you're going to be, and the feeling of success you're going to have by doing triathlon now, versus the athlete who is obsessed with mastering triathlon and forgets that they're the person in charge. And they take a version of themselves that isn't where it could be to try and do a sport that they want to do better and best, or good and then greater. And then they continue to fall short. So they continue to look at themselves and maybe degrade themselves, or have negative self-talk. And just, which one of those options would you prefer? But again, I think that the mastery of oneself is I think the harder pill to swallow, I guess, in a way, because I think it's the hardest one, and I think it oftentimes comes with answers that we really don't necessarily want to remind ourselves of, that are really answers. Like, okay, maybe I don't have that kind of time. Maybe I do need to get up early, or maybe I do need to go to sleep earlier, or eat right or not eat right. Like, those are the decisions that are hard. But again, master yourself first, and then, the mastery of triathlon or endurance sports will then follow.
Yeah, man, it's like you can't juggle too many balls, man. This is all about kind of, in a way, simplifying everything. And what you're saying makes so much sense. It's just that, whether that mastery of yourself, and I, of course, I feel like you're talking to me, a lot of this is, but you get into these patterns where you're doing something consistently and it's working, but a lot of times you just don't see it or believe it, and then you get distracted, and the next thing you know, we're running down some other road. It's like, I think when that example you used of your athlete that did a 152 half marathon, for example, that's 2 in a row. And so what's the natural tendency, right? Is like, I could do 152, I can do 142 now, and then I can do 132, and then 122. But the reality is that at some point you're going to crack if you keep pushing that limit like that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, on this whole, it's like, all right, why don't we master the 152 marathon or half now? You know what I mean? Like, let's just stay under control and really nail that and get that down. And then we have the base, and then we have the foundation for, going to 145 or whatever it is, without always having to leap right ahead, leap from all the steps.
Or just continue on mastering the person that was able to do the training, that was able to get them to the 152.
Right, because that's what distracts you from being the person.
Right, because most people say, like, or athletes will oftentimes, all right, now what do we need to do to get to this? They do, like, they PR, they have this, like, really, successful race or whatever, and like, all right, now what do we need to do to get to here? The same thing, like the same thing. Not everything's always the same, but it's not time to reinvent the wheel. It's time to continue on, because again, like, one of the funniest things I hear people say, oh, it's your philosophy. I'm like, no, my philosophy is just like, don't be an idiot. and use common sense and be consistent. And if you can do those things, then I guarantee you're going to be faster and more successful than most triathletes, because a lot of triathletes will panic and get so distracted and do so many different things they'll never actually know. Because again, when it comes down to like finding a path, a lot of athletes will get so distracted with their training, they'll do 19 different things that if they happen to get a good result, it's like driving blindfolded 28 miles and you get to a destination, it's exactly where you want it to go. But the chances of you getting there again are now basically zero, because you have no idea how to plot the way forward, because the same haphazard, distracted, panic training that got you here is going to be very difficult to match, or you're not going to, you again won't have the same level of adherence or patience to stick to the same thing. And so, if you've had a great result and you're self-coaching yourself, or you're with a coach and you've had great results, then stay with those great results, and stick to it, and even if you flatline or start to feel like things are flatlining or not getting where you want to go, like just keep doing it. There's all kinds of different pictures and images and quotes or whatever about, like the people give up about an inch before a huge breakthrough. Yeah. Or the
toughest.
Exactly. The business professionals or entrepreneurs that had these, startup companies, and somebody offered them like chump change to buy the whole thing, and they're like, nah, I'm gonna turn down, they're like in like insane amounts of debt, and this guy's like offers them like $150K, and they're like, which would like change their life at that time, and they turn it down, and then 20 years later their company's worth like 50 billion. It's like those are the kind of decisions that, again, the decision that businessman made had nothing to do with mastering their business. They had to master themselves and stay patient and believe in themselves and not jump to conclusions or not be impulsive. So their decision had nothing to do with mastering their business. It had to do with mastering themselves so they could feel like they could continue, because they had the opportunity to master more of their business. And that is, I think, the approach that we should all have to endurance training, because it's so hard, it can be so long and so tedious, that there always has to be an opportunity for a win. And I think that a win to me is having the win of doing your 30-minute run when that's all on your schedule is just as big of a win in getting it done as the day you have a 6-hour bike ride. They're both equal wins, because you did what was required on the day. And there is no one is better than the other, because I promise you, if you're a person that makes the 30 runs count and does those and stays focused, then you're going to also be the person that does the 6-hour rides. And again, it's about mastering yourself and understanding what's important and the why behind it, than it is just going for the big ones and trying to master that session just for the day, and not pay attention to the other one. So again, huge topic, very broad topic. Mastery is not perfection, but again, try to master yourself first. And that's not saying that there are a million things you need to master about yourselves, because one of the most important things, in my opinion, to do is also understanding where your strengths are, and maximizing those strengths, and staying on those strengths and focusing on those strengths, because again, that's what's going to help continue you on the path of getting better or mastering whatever it is you're trying to master.
How does
like us trying to master this podcast?
Yeah, right. Just keep doing it.
Keep doing it. Just keep doing it. They're not always pretty. They're not always episodes people like. As we are very aware. But hey,
what? Hey, how does the idea of a 6-hour trainer ride sound to you right now, by the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not in like no way, shape, or form ready for that.
Oh, I know, but I mean, like when you said that, I just started getting like this feeling inside me, like, oh my god.
Like they're breaking out in hives. Like,
man.
People
like,
should be a long way away. Yeah, people should be like a long, long way away from that. But no, have fun mastering things and understanding their place within it, and have fun getting better, have fun being healthy, have fun being happy. Which again I think is like one of the negative and unfortunate symptoms of our society right now, is that like people are unhappy being happy, because like they always want something more, or better or whatever, and But yeah, do things that make you feel uncomfortable, that push your boundaries of getting to know yourself. And I think that's a true way of just becoming a better athlete and a better person, and doing things the way you wanted to get them done. And I think, it's just important to not be afraid to, look in the mirror before you look at the race calendar, and to figure out ways and have them complement each other, and just get ready to have an awesome year.
Yeah. I'm all for it, man.
Yep. I'll give a detailed race recap on Monday of how I get demolished in this trail run on Saturday.
Oh, man, I'm excited about that. What is it again?
Dude, I was telling Allie this morning we were getting ready to take Hayden to school, and I was like, I haven't raced, like done an event or raced in over a year, well over a year, like 14, 15 months. The only kind of event or race I've done was with her. We did a half marathon where I was pacing her, but like an event where it was just like me, where I feel like I have to plan and like train specifically for. This is it, and dude, I'm gonna get demolished.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome. Yeah, I mean, listen, trail running is like a totally different sport than road running, which is also not my greatest forte. But it's just a totally different. I'm actually super excited because I have no expectations at all. Back in, if I was doing triathlon right now, I'd be looking at who's participating, what are the past race results, what gets you on the podium, what's a great, what's this. And this one, I'm just like, dude, just survive. Don't fall on your face. Don't crack your skull on a rock. Just stay upright and have some fun, which is super exciting. But it's trail running is, I'm actually learning a lot through what I've been looking into and researching on how to train really well for trail running. It's actually, I'm using a lot of that mentality with the athletes I'm working with now that do long distance triathlon, in terms of strength running and getting stronger and the things you need to do to become just a more even more durable athlete. But I went out yesterday and ran 13 on the trails, and doing 18 on Saturday. I'm gonna rest up and be easy on the body this week and go out and have fun and be prepared. What I've learned and read, and then just kind of what I feel is right about all races and events is, I've got to take it super chill the first like 10 to 12 miles.
Is it 50K?
No, it's 18 miles is all it is. And it's not all it is. That's a lot. It's just not, when you say 50K, it's not quite a 50K. So it's 18 miles. But I know like the last 4 miles are like straight up Lookout Mountain. And so they're going to be just brutal. But sounds like fun. Weather's going to be great. I'm excited. Be a good learning experience, and I'm excited to get out and have some fun and see what the day gives me and how wrecked my quads are the next day.
Yeah, I think you're probably pretty good shape for it.
We'll see what happens. I'm excited. Have some fun. But yeah, we hope everyone. We'll be back on Thursday, obviously, and then it got Christmas Eve and Christmas the following week. We hope you all have a happy holidays. If you haven't, stop on by our website, crushingiron.com. It is currently our one-stop shop for all things crushing iron, training, camps, coaching, you name it, it's there. Swing on by. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback, whatever, you can always hit up mike.crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always reach out to me directly, c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Talk to you soon.
All right.
See ya.